I had a family member in my immediate family who struggled with some mental health issues. And that was interesting because at the time I was 12, so I was in middle school. And that time in your life is so hard anyway. And then there's a person in the house who's really struggling to keep it together. And so you're going to school every day and you don't want anyone to know something's wrong. And so you do kind of end up coming up with all these weird defense mechanisms to hide what's happening at home because you're already trying to fit in at school.
Graduate early, you're gone as a thing, and there's nothing your paranoid parents can say.
Everything sort of worked out okay?
Yeah, it did, but it was after a lot of medication and a lot of therapy, and it sounds so cliche because that's what happens in the show, but the shows are written so well that there's so much truth in them, and so when you have had those experiences in your life and you're doing it on stage, you're like, oh, this is legit, this is how life happens, and it happens kind of out of nowhere. Everything's normal one day, and then the next they're not, and you just keep plugging on, you know?
That'll keep the place off spinning, and the world just can't stop spinning. I think the house is spinning.
Diana, honey,
Dad?
don't worry about it. Go on ahead, you'll miss the bus.
Mom? It's okay. I'm just making sandwiches. On the floor.
My advice would be to embrace it and to just love the person that much more because they're struggling and they're in a world and a place where you can't touch them. And if you push them away, you might lose them. You're there to talk and you're there to take them to the hospital and you're there to do whatever you can to help because the angrier you get, the more you push them away, and that's when they need you most.
Talkbacks can really bring out the teaching aspect, the learning aspect of what we might say could be very difficult circumstances. And from a Buddhist standpoint, we really believe that the more difficult the situation, the more lessons we can learn, the more we can grow. If we look at art that way, then we can examine areas we might be reluctant to see without that opening that the art can provide. Next to normal particularly is of interest to me because I've had students who have bipolar disease and I've seen how disruptive it can be, but also how amazingly helpful meditation can be as a regular thing in someone's life to create stability. What I've noticed is that although it can be extremely hard on the family, that people who do have bipolar disorder have a kind of open channel, are remarkably gifted, very creative, very bright, and if we can find ways to encourage that, meditation seems to have a wonderful kind of bringing things back to deep grounding in the fundamental reality, which is not so prone to being swept from one extreme to another. So the person knows that there's something really deep that they can trust.